You've got to be relentless at life in order to get what you want. Whether you want more income, whether you want more sales, whether you want a better lifestyle for you and your family, no one, and I mean no one, is going to give it to you. All right, hey friends, and welcome to another episode of the Danny Morel Show. You know, this is exciting because I haven't done an interview like this in a while. And I cannot be more excited than to have this guy on our show for one reason and one reason only, and that's because he's got a relentless spirit about him. He's got an incredible story. I think that his story is going to impact you incredibly, especially if you want to do great things in your business in 2019. I think this is going to be one of those episodes that you come back to reinvigorate your mindset, to help you focus on what you have to accomplish. Welcome, Mr. Edwin Arroyo.
Yeah, thank you.
That was a big intro, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
That's a lot of hype, so now you got to right?
Thank you. I got to live up to that. Whoa.
So
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you, man. I'm excited to have you. And first things first, you know, you just told me a little bit about your story and about how it all got started for you. And I would love for our audience to hear that. Tell me where your story begins.
Yeah, so I was born in Bogota, Colombia, and I came here when I was 6 years old. My parents brought my older sister and I here for a better opportunity.
Yep.
And then when we first came in, we thought it was the perfect dream. And then, unfortunately, that didn't last too long. 2 weeks after coming to the U.S., our home gets raided by law enforcement for suspicion of drug trafficking.
Wow.
Both of my parents end up in jail that day. My sister and I end up in a foster home.
And then, hold on. So this is, how old are you at the time?
6 years old.
Oh, my gosh. That's rough.
Yeah, and then...
I'm thinking about my son right now, who's 8, 9, that's 6. Wow, that's rough.
Yeah. I still remember the day. I hear this door on the knock. Somebody knocks on the door, and I go answer it. As I'm answering it, the door is getting kicked down, and it's just cops coming from the front, cops coming from the back, helicopters all over the home, and you know, I end up, like I said, we end up in a foster home. Mom gets acquitted after 3 months. Dad gets acquitted after 8 months. So we're thinking this nightmare is over. It's over. But in reality, it was just beginning. Our home for the next 4 years would get raided once a year.
Really?
And finally, the fourth time, now I'm 10 years old, they do put my dad away. And that was a big blow for me because my dad was my hero. Even though I didn't know what he did for a living, I still respected how he took care of everyone.
Sure.
And
yeah.
He was responsible, and he always came through on his word. Yeah. And the cops were nice enough to let me speak to him. And the last thing he said to me was, son, I need you to take care of the house, and I need you to be the man of the house. And I took those words very seriously, and I promised him that I would. And then 2 years later, we run out of money. And we were so broke, we ended up in a city called Huntington Park, and we ended up renting this 3-bedroom apartment. We move in, but then realize we can't afford it, so we have to rent out 2 of the bedrooms in that 3-bedroom apartment. And my siblings and I and mother end up in this little room. So now we have 14 people living in this little 3-bedroom, 500 square foot apartment. And as you can imagine, it wasn't the best living condition. It was crammed.
Sure.
To this day, I still remember the roaches waking me up in the middle of the night. And I just remember going to bed every day saying, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to make $100,000 a year. And I became obsessed with that number, $100,000 a year, because I knew that's the way I was going to buy my mom her house. Because that was the one fight my parents would always have, because my dad could never prove where the money was coming from. And that was my mom's biggest dream. And I knew that the only way I was going to be able to do that was if I made $100,000. And then the other thing that stands out from that time was that my mom was a born-again Christian at that point. And every night she would pray over me, pray over us, actually, because we're all there. In the morning, I'd hear the same thing, and these prayers that she'd continue to say, which was, please give my son wisdom, give him greatness, make him a great leader. And at a very young age, I started to believe. I had faith. And I think that's one of my number one rules is you have to have faith. You have to believe in something. You have to believe in a higher power. Because if you're going to take on God-sized challenges, self-proficiency is no longer an option.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So at that time, I began to believe that God was with me. Now, the other part of that is you have to have faith in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. And the other great thing that moms did for me, she put me in sports. And in sports, I sucked, but They taught me how to compete. It taught me how to go through adversity. And more importantly, it taught me how, if I worked hard enough, I could get what I want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some way, somehow, I would end up starting. And I took those little victories with me, and little by little, I started building this confidence about me because I was a very, very shy kid. And fast forward to 3 years later after that, I go on a job search because I really just want to help my family. And no one would hire me, and I must have gone through like 30 interviews. I finally find this company that wanted to take a chance on me, and it was telemarketing. It had to do with selling over the phones. And again, I was this shy kid, but my goals were bigger than any excuse I could have gave myself. And I was just like, well, I guess I'm going to have to just make it happen. They're the only ones that are hiring me, so I'm going to have to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful to have a job and so fearful to lose it because I realized how hard it was to get it, that I just went in there and worked my butt off. And by the time I was 16, 17 years old, I became a supervisor of about 6 people. And by the time I was 18, 19 years old, I became a manager of about 40 people. And again, how do you start believing in yourself? Well, you got to start getting some results, right? And as I look back to that, when I was 18, 19, whatever that was, and I got that job as a sales manager, to me, I was scared because I'm like, man, I'm bossing people that are 40 years older than me. And, you know, I'm not as good as them. But at the end of the day, I had to make it happen. And what happens is when you surpass what you think you're worth, then that starts building that identity. Right. And I started to feel like I deserved it. Right. You can't receive what your mind can't accept. Right. So if your mind can't accept it, you're never going to receive it. So you have to feel like you deserve it. And as I look back to those early years, I started to feel like, well, there's no 19-year-old running 40 people around here. I guess I must be pretty good.
Yeah.
I guess I'm worth $100,000 a year. And in my head, I was worth $100,000. Right. And then during these 6 years that I was at this company, they taught me the 3 biggest lessons in my life.
Which are?
Number 1 is, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions.
I love that.
So I couldn't go to my leaders with a problem. I had to come with a problem and a solution.
Right.
So at a very young age, I realized that I had to look at problems as solutions. As you know, if you can solve problems, you're going to get paid very well.
Very well.
The second thing I learned was there's no such thing as failure. Meaning there's different ways of getting what you want.
And there's different journeys and there's different paths.
Exactly.
And for some it's easier, for some it's a little harder.
Exactly. So there's different ways from getting to point A to point B. Meaning it might not work the first time like you just said, but you just try another way until you figure it out. And like to me, I've failed many battles, but I have yet to lose a war. And I don't mean that in an arrogant way. It's just I want to talk about resiliency. And I've been knocked down all the time. I'd get immediately right back, keep pushing forward. Get knocked down, keep pushing forward. I got passed up quite a bit at the phone company for promotions. And I just kept, even though I was upset, I was just like, you know what? My time's going to come. I'm just going to continue to work my butt off. And it's just a matter of time. And eventually, I got what I wanted. Right? So I failed at first, but I didn't give up. And that's why the failure only exists the minute you give up, you stop trying, you stop following through, and you stop pushing through.
But I think people have such a hard time with that. It's funny you said, I may have lost the battle, but I didn't lose the war. The way I think about it is the war is over when I die. That's when the war is over.
Exactly.
And I think people have a difficult time with that. They get so caught up with failure and with what failure means. Like, what did you do or to be able to get past that? Or was that something that instinctively was always in you type of deal?
It's one of those blessings that I think it was just inside of me. Like, I just wanted it so bad.
You wanted that $100,000 a year. You wanted to buy your mama house.
That was my goal. I mean, I had big goals. And so then fast forward, at that time I'm about 19. Fast forward to now I'm 21 years old, about to turn 22. And the VP of that company comes into my office and says, hey, I'm going to resign and I'm going to start this alarm company. And I can't guarantee you the 70 grand a year that you're making. So now I'm making good money.
Right.
And I can't guarantee that $70,000 a year, but if you make this happen, you could possibly double, triple, quadruple what you make here.
Right.
And the first thing I thought was, well, this guy's making about 200 grand a year, so he must be pretty serious about it. Number two, I thought, well, if he's willing to teach me how to start a company from the ground up, I'm like, this is my shortcut to college.
Yeah.
Because I only graduated with a 1.8 GPA. Not proud of the 1.8 GPA, but I'm proud that that never stopped me, right?
I think I had a 2.1.
Yeah.
Maybe if that, maybe.
Yeah, so, and then the third thing was that I was a big, big dreamer. So as I mentioned earlier, at 12 years old, I'm going to make 100 grand a year. Right. Well, also at 16, 17 years old, which is probably what contributed to my 1.8 GPA, is I would ditch school to go to Beverly Hills and go window shopping down Rodeo Drive. I saw Pretty Woman, so I just wanted to go down there and I wanted to see what all that was about.
Yeah.
And then I would go to all the homes in Hollywood Hills and Beverly Hills, and I would literally sit out there for hours and look at views.
Wow. And
then I'd go back to work and get all sort of like bummed out that I didn't live out there.
Yeah.
But before I didn't know how to articulate what had just happened, but everyone thought I was crazy, because how are you going to leave a job that's paying you $70,000 a year for this unknown, right? And when you're making, this is back in '99, so that's equivalent to $150,000 probably now, right? And everybody was like, "You're crazy. You can't leave." But what I did is, by me touching the dream and exposing myself to the dream, it made me realize that there was something else out there than just Huntington Park and Southgate. Because making 70 grand a year in Huntington Park and Southgate, you're living large.
You're the guy.
You're the man.
Right.
And I now have tied this back to my reticular activating system. Yeah. And as you know, the reticular activation system is part of your subconscious mind. Yeah. And it catches and sees all sensory information, but purposely does not send it back to your conscious mind. And that's so your conscious mind doesn't get overloaded and then causing it to shut down, meaning go to sleep. So what it does instead is your subconscious filters back to your conscious mind what it needs to see.
Right.
And it does it by three things: what your beliefs are,
right,
what you need for survival, and your dreams and goals. So as I look back to that moment, this moment that changed my life forever, it was the easiest decision for me ever, because when that decision came, I was like, this is my dreams and goals. This is how I'm going to get to Hollywood Hills. Right. This is how I'm going to be able to buy my mom her house. This is my belief. This is what I believe since I was 12 years old. I'm worth 100 grand now. I know I'm going to be worth more. Right. And it's sort of what I needed for survival. It was my obsession. And the reason I bring that up is because sometimes you could have opportunities staring you in the face. Right. But if those aren't your beliefs, those aren't your dreams and goals, you won't even see them. You won't even see them. Yeah. You won't even see them. And, we were just talking about your offices, and, I did some research before coming, and a couple months back, and now I'm seeing Intero everywhere. And
it's kind of crazy.
In Downey, I would drive down the street. I never saw this beautiful Intero building. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, I'm driving yesterday, and I'm like, there goes Intero.
Yeah, that's it right there.
Right? Yeah. Because that became important to me. Right. Right. So now it's in my head, so it feeds it back. So to me, that's why that decision was so easy. And then, of course, I don't go all in, which brings me to my next point. I say, okay, let me try this. And what I would do is I would work at the phone company from 8 to 3. I'd stop working at 3 o'clock, and then I'd go knock doors to sell alarms to see if it worked out or not. And I went 10 days without selling. Right. And I'm looking at the other, my brother-in-law was doing this. My brother-in-law at the time was doing the same thing, doing 2 a day. So he was making about $800 a day. And I'm seeing all this money he's making, and I'm like, I'm just as good as him. Right. And I had to really look inside, and what the problem was is I wasn't fully committed. Sure. So we were just testing the waters. Just testing the waters. Now, so then what I did, after those 10 days of not selling, I resigned. I said, you know what, I'm going to resign. And what that did is it brought my necessity level up. That took a lot of guts, by the way. Yeah, because it's 70 grand that I'm just saying peace, right? Goodbye. But then my necessity level, urgency level.
Can I talk about something real
Yeah,
fast?
go ahead.
Because you got to understand, a lot of our audience is real estate professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And it never fails, and maybe you could speak to this.
Yeah.
It never fails that when an agent is having a difficult time, for that matter, when any entrepreneur is having a difficult time producing at the level that they want to be producing at, I can kind of say, I'm at a place where I've been doing this long enough where I could just kind of feel it for them. I could look at their eyes, I could sense their energy, and I know right off the bat, one of the main reasons they don't produce at a high enough level is because they have a backup game. In other words, maybe they're getting Social Security income, maybe they're getting money from the military, maybe they have some sort of a pension plan, maybe their spouse works and make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's like, until you do what you said you did, you'll never make it big.
Yeah.
Because there's no need to
100%,
make it big.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my definition of necessity level is it's a heightened willingness that untaps this tremendous amount of ability you didn't think you had.
Right.
Right? All of a sudden, boom, that's why it's a heightened willingness.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, you're like, damn, I need to make it happen.
You better make it happen.
So when I quit that $70,000 a year job, my bills were $4,000. All of a sudden, that weekend, I studied all my material. The previous,
You hadn't studied
I was
anything.
winging it because I
Right.
thought I was that good.
Right.
Right?
Oh, you sound just like real estate agents. Oh my God, this is right. Yeah.
I was winging it. I didn't even freaking study because I'm just like, I know I could sell. There's a piece
Right.
of cake. I was getting my ass kicked.
right.
Now I quit. I'm like, oh shit, now it's real.
Yeah.
Spent probably 18, 20 hours that weekend learning my material, studying. I knew my pitch. I knew my objection handlings. I knew everything. Now when I walked up to a door, my confidence was like here, right? That day I got 5 sales in one day.
That is awesome.
And I made...
Where in the previous 10, you hadn't gotten any.
Exactly. And I couldn't sleep that night.
People, can you just please like rewind and listen to that again? Because that's the key. That's
Yeah.
the key. It's like we have an industry of wingers. Everybody wings it because our commission checks are so big.
Yep.
So, if my commission check is 10 grand and I sell 7 of them,
Yep.
and I make 70 grand, and then my wife brings home another 70, we're good.
Yeah.
No, you're not fucking good. You're living
No.
in mediocrity. That's what's happening. And he just gave you the key right now.
Totally. And then, so then the first thing I do, so then I couldn't sleep that night because I'm like, man, I just made $1,500 in one day. That's what I used to make there in a week.
Right.
And then I'm like, I got 29 more days. If I
Days,
can
right.
do the same thing, my mind just started going crazy. I could play
That's
this,
right.
this,
That's right.
this,
That's
right?
right.
And the other cool thing that I did now, looking back at this whole thing, is I immediately bought a minivan. So even though I didn't have the people, I bought the minivan. And again, that's putting yourself in a pressure situation
Yes.
that heightens your urgency necessity level. Now I'm like, well, dude, I'm spending $500 a month on this van. I better
Or
fill
get
it
a
up.
team. Right.
And it just gave me that extra. Now, what most people do is, well, I'll buy the van once I get the team. Well, then you keep, oh, it'll be next year, and it'll be next year. And before you know it, it's just
It never
procrastination country, right?
Yeah.
And so that was huge for me. And then what I did after that was sort of changed my life forever, which was, again, goes back to having a purpose. And later on I'll touch a little more on this, but you always have to have a purpose. And for me, as you know, that purpose for me was buying my mom's house. Right. So I just made this money. And that week I probably made, I think all in, I think I did 12 deals, which was probably $7,000. And what I did saved me, which is I immediately went to an open house that weekend. Everyone thought I was crazy because everyone's like, why are you going to go look for a house? Like, you don't even know if you're going to make this type of money for the rest of your life.
This is big what he's about to say.
I'm like, chill out, dude. It's I go, I'm worth $100,000 a year, so no matter what I do, I'm going to be great at it. So even if my alarm business goes to crap in 2 years, I'm going to be able to own a house because I'm worth $100,000.
Sure.
And everybody laughed at me. I, of course, go to the open house, and I think they were going to laugh at me. But instead, I go to the open house. They give me this blueprint on how to get it, which was you need to come up with, I think it was $12,000, and your payment's going to be $1,400 a month. I'm like, well, $1,400 a month, I make that in a day.
Right.
And then I'm like, $12,000 down. I'm like, well, if I could do this in 12 weeks, that means all I got to do is make $3,000 every week, and then I could buy my mom her house.
Sure.
Because $1,000 was to pay my bills, $1,000 was for the IRS and savings, and the other $1,000 was for my mom's house. If I do this for 12 weeks, make $3,000 in a week for 12 weeks straight, I was going to be able to buy my mom her house. Right. So then I went home, grabbed my mom, drove her to the house, and I said, Mom, this home will be yours. It's a home in Downey. When you grow up in HP, Downey's like the Beverly Hills of HP. Yeah. And I said, this house will be yours in 90 days. She starts crying. I start crying. Now I can't go back.
No, of course you can't.
Like I just, to the most important person in my life, I just told her this was going to happen. And of course, 90 days happened. Oh, so now there was many times that I wanted to quit at 8:30. And when you don't sell when you're knocking doors and you're knocking from 2 o'clock to 8:30 and you go 6 hours without selling, it's an eternity.
Sure.
But because I had a purpose, while everybody stopped at 8 o'clock, I continued going. And of course, I'd get a deal at 10:45 at night.
Yeah.
And that brought my confidence up. I started to believe, oh crap, I am this good, right? And if I wouldn't have had that purpose, I would have stopped knocking at 8. If you don't have a purpose, your purpose becomes your bills.
Well, not only that.
Yeah.
But maybe something you didn't realize is that when you have a purpose, the way you talk to people changes. Yeah. The intensity, the skill set, the urgency, everything changes so your numbers and your efficiency goes way up.
Yes.
It's like selling by design versus selling by default. Mm-hmm. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. That my urgency was like it needs to happen. It was like my life, my mom's life depended on it.
And
it's really the way I would go after it. But again, I think back, I made $6,000 that week. If I wouldn't have gone to that open house, I would have immediately just chilled.
That's exactly.
Because my bills were only $4,000.
Sure.
In 1 week, I had already paid it. I would have started partying, blah, blah, blah. So I always say, I don't know if this is the best way to articulate it, I tricked myself into success.
Yeah.
Because after 90 days of doing 10 to 12 deals a week straight, it just became a habit. My belief level shot through the roof.
And your standards for selling shot through the roof, right?
Yep. So back to the common theme here is you can't receive what your mind can't accept.
Right.
Well, my mind started accepting that I was this good. And really, I wasn't that good.
Right.
I was just outworking everybody, getting results, which then made me feel in my heart that I was good. Right. So, knowledge gives you confidence, right? And so when you're going to the door, you're not scared, and people see that. They feed off you, right? You can't transfer that which you don't feel.
Right.
Right? So if you feel fearful when you're selling, you're going to transfer that, and no one's going to want to do business with you. Somebody
once told me human beings are like dogs. They have a sixth sense, and they can smell fear from a mile away. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, I got a good one for you with dogs, but we'll get into it later.
Okay, cool.
But that's exactly it, and it's that confidence. So you need to put yourself in that situation because a lot of people, you can declare all you want. I'm big on declaration.
Sure.
In fact, one of my favorite proverbs is 18:21, which is death or life are in the power of the tongue, right? Mm-hmm. But if you don't take action, right, it doesn't work. You could say, I'm going to be the best real estate agent out there. I'm going to be just as good as Downey. But until you get results, you're not going to believe it. You could say it till you're blue. It's not going to happen until you put yourself in a pressured situation that you don't think you could attain, which most people won't do because of fear.
Because of fear.
Because they're like, man, if I put myself there and I fail, I'm going to suck. But that's the only way you're going to grow because then you surpass it.
And then you just tell yourself a new story. Mm-hmm. I can do it.
And you can do it.
That's it.
All of a sudden, boom. Yep. So that changed my life forever because now I had this confidence in me when I was selling that I just knew that I was always going to get one. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter if it was 8 o'clock and I didn't have a deal. It was just a matter of time. It made me trust the process.
Got it.
That if you talk, it's this simple, guys. You talk to enough people, you get these many presentations, it's going to equal to a deal.
Right.
It's a numbers game. It's that. I hate I hate making it sound like it's that simple, but I mean, what's not simple is being able to take no's, right? But as long as you focus on the presentation part of it, and you know what those numbers are. Hey, if I do this, 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 I know that we go out to a deal. You can focus on targets versus the goal.
And then, you know, you did something, Edwin, that I'm pretty passionate about, and it's something that I feel that our industry is missing. And by the way, I really want you guys to like go back and listen to everything he said, because like the secrets are right there. It's right there what he said, right? If you think about the story of him going to the open house, many of us would have not have gone to the open house. We would have said, "Oh my God, I just made 7 G's." We would have called all our friends and we would have went out and partied.
Yes.
And then when the money, the 7 grand ran out, then we would go find another 7 grand. And
Yep.
that's where people live. They stay in that zone.
Yep.
Right off the bat, he decided to push himself, right? And then you did something that, again, most people don't do. You then started to leverage what you learned,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Awareness.
most people again, they stay where they're at. They're doing great in production, right? You went out and you took an individual talent, an individual desire, and an individual skill set, and you allowed it to help other people.
Yes.
And you built a business.
Exactly.
Talk to me about that.
And that's where it all started. And that whole thing, so I have a formula that I've literally used for everything I've attained in my life. Everything. And it's so practical that it's freaking funny.
Those are the best formulas, by the way.
And the formula, there's this misconception of the formula. Most people, they wait till they have something. Meaning, the minute I save 80 grand, I'll go to an open house.
Right.
And then I'll become a homeowner.
Right.
So it goes have, take action, become.
Right.
That's the way most people do it, and it's the wrong way to do it.
Right.
Because you're so worried about money and having money and saving money that you're going to lose it.
Yeah.
The way it should be is the opposite, which is first you become.
Yep.
Right? That minute, part of that story, same week it all happened, I was living in Southgate at the time still, and I just, again, did really well for myself. I got woken up by a roach one last time. And I literally woke up in the middle of that, like, fudge! And I go to the mirror, and I remember this day like it was yesterday. I said, I'm not a freaking renter anymore.
Right.
I'm an owner.
Right.
You know, I'm done with this.
Right.
And that weekend, I'm like, I'm going to go get the open house. Right there, I'm a homeowner. I'm no longer a renter. I became when I said I'm worth the 100 grand. So even though I didn't have the money, I still started taking action towards it. But what I realized once I started taking action is then I got the blueprint. And then what I did was give myself a deadline. So it's become, take action, have. Most people mess up with the deadline because they don't give themselves a deadline. And the deadline, you have to go after it like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it's going to make you, again, do more than you're supposed to. If you don't give yourself a deadline, it becomes a dream.
Yep.
And it never happens. And everything I've done, and the crazy part is when you take action towards that goal, God will start putting people, or whatever you believe in, the universe, whatever, the right people start coming together to making that whole thing that you thought was impossible into this possible thing. And I'll give you a quick story that people love to hear. When I first bought my Lamborghini in 2008, in 2006, I made a declaration. Okay, well, for years I fought it. And this, again, goes with your identity. You'll start making excuses on why you don't want it. Right? So some people don't like to talk about material stuff, but at the end of the day, to some point, people do like material stuff.
Sure.
I think what happens is a lot of people, when they realize they can't get it, and I don't want it anyway,
whatever.
That's not for me, blah, blah. Well, that was me in 2004. I was driving around in a Porsche Turbo. I had a Range Rover. And I just said, oh, you know what, Lamborghinis, that's not for me. I don't need that stuff, blah, blah, blah. That's for people that are just wasting their money, right? Yeah. Literally, I was that person. Yeah. And then I was living in Woodland Hills at the time, and they just opened up a Lamborghini dealership next to my house. Well, all of a sudden, I'm seeing all these kids driving Lamborghinis, because this is when real estate was booming.
Right.
And I'm very competitive. I'm like, holy crap, I just been passed up.
Right.
So, and then it made me realize, wait a minute, a Lamborghini, this is like, it's been your dream since you were a kid.
Yeah.
So anyways, I do my thing. I declare, okay, I'm going to be a Lamborghini owner. I immediately go to the dealership. I realize that it's going to be 300 grand. I realize that after I'm done with interest, it's going to be 500 grand. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to lease. I mean, there's no way I'm going to finance this thing. If I'm going to buy it, I need to own it.
Right.
So I decide that I'm going to own it. I give myself a 2-year goal. And because I felt guilty about spending that type of cash, I'm like, I need to find a new source of income. So at that point, I wasn't knocking on doors anymore. I had my guys knocking, and I was in the office doing administrative stuff. So what I did is I went back to the field from 6 to 10 o'clock at night. I would go knocking, and every month, all the money I made from that, I would put back to the savings account to buy this Lamborghini.
Got it.
A year and 10 months passed. So now I only got 2 more months because I wanted to do this by my 32nd birthday, because I'm like, by 40 years old, everybody's driving a Lambo. I need to do it when I'm 30.
Yeah.
You know, again, I would always find stupid ways to just make me compete.
Yes.
And I'm like, I need to do it by 32. So I only got 2 more months left. And literally, this is what I thought. I'm like, well, it's taken me a year and 10 months to save $155,000. I know it seems impossible that in 2 months I'm going to come up with $140,000. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to make this happen because I just don't fail. And I continued to focus on what I was in control of, which is I could still go from 6 to 10, and I'm going to go till the deadline. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen, but I'm not stopping. Right. I never declared that I wasn't going to do it, because I think the minute you say, I can't do it, it'll never happen. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call, and it's the broker that's trying to get me the car. And he says, I found your Lamborghini. It's exactly the way you want it. It's a pearl white. It's got the black rims. It's got the lights in the back, blacked out. And I say, well, it sounds great and all, but I don't have money for it. He's like, no, that's why I'm calling you. I found a guy that's got 4 Lamborghinis. He just bought one for his wife. The wife is pregnant, doesn't want to drive it. He's so upset he just wants to get rid of it. And he'll give it to you for $150. Wow. And literally, I went with him the next morning to the bank. He wrote a check for $110. I wrote a check for $150. He had paid off, the car he bought it for $290. So he paid off $110. I paid off $150, $260. The car was mine, pink slip and all.
Love that.
And the moral of this story is, every time you're going to get your blessing, you're always going to get that last knock. Something's going to drop you to the floor.
Yeah.
And that's your chance to, is that going to be the same old person you used to be, and is that going to make you go back to who you were?
Right.
Or are you just going to take that punch, immediately get back up, and say no? Continue to push.
Yeah.
And that's when you get that blessing. But too many people quit right before they're about to get that blessing. And it's always right. It just, for whatever reason, it's right before it's going to come.
Yeah.
It's almost like a test.
Yeah.
And that's why I love sharing that story so much.
That's a great story.
Because it's, again, that's just one example, but I could give you many examples like that.
I think I want to go buy a Lamborghini now.
So that was that. So that formula has been very good to me.
I love that. And so tell us about your business now.
Yeah.
What exactly is it that you do?
So I own a home security company. So we're a professional sales, service, and installation company for home automation and home security products. In the first 10 years that I did the business, I made a ton of money, but I wasn't in love with what I was doing because I didn't really see it as a career. And part of that was I never saw anyone doing bigger things than I did. So I sort of plateaued. And I always say, nothing in life stays the same. You're either getting better or you're getting worse. Right. Well, I began to be stagnant, and I wasn't growing. And because I wasn't growing, I started investing into different things. I had one foot in. I went back to 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And I'd invest in things that I had no idea on, and I'd lose my money. And then my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, says to me, Edwin, I've never seen you invest in the one thing you know about, which is alarms. You invest in all this other dumb stuff, but you don't invest in the thing that you're an expert about. And I always invested in sales guys, but I never invested back into the organization.
Got it.
So I was like, yeah, you're right. And then it was around the same time that I finally started seeing companies that were bigger than I was, way bigger than I was, and I've never seen them before. And I was like, well, if they can do it, I can do it.
Sure.
And I finally confronted that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So again, it was an all-in moment where you basically burn the ships.
So crazy.
Yeah, you burned the ship.
How old are you?
Now I'm 27, I think.
No, how old are you right now?
42.
This is so crazy.
Yeah. So I'm finally I burned the ships, and I'm like, this is what I want to do, and I want to build a company that people that feel the same way would want to be a part of, which is they wanted to make it a career. Because I was always a big fan of real estate. It's like every real estate company I went to, it's like, you could make a career here. In the alarms, it was like hole in the wall.
Right.
Like, do people, is this even real?
Yeah.
You know, so that's why, but then I was like, wait a minute, I could build something.
You could make
like
something
that.
awesome. Yeah.
And that's when I decided, first thing I did was I invested in a CFO. And that was a hard decision for me because it was $150,000 that I was going to have to shell out.
Right.
And then, of course, your doubts,
right.
the BS you feed yourself, I call them my considerations. Yeah, what if you pay $150,000 and this guy doesn't make it? You just pissed away $150,000, blah, blah, blah. But again, you put yourself in a pressure situation where you're just like, you know what? I got to make this happen if the company's going to grow. Boom. I went from 6 office employees. Within a year, I brought 50 office employees.
Wow.
Now I'm like, I got to go get the sales. Right? Most people wait till they have the sales to do all that.
Right.
But when that happens sometimes, that's how you end up out of business, because then you lose all these things that fall through the cracks, right? You end up in lawsuits and things like that. Well, I don't want to be like that. I'm like, I need to have my foundation strong.
Right.
But then I also believed in myself. So again, people always they've always said, Edwin, you're such a risk taker. No, I believe in myself.
Yeah.
And again, goes back to what I said earlier. When you take on God-sized challenges, self-proficiency is no longer an option. This is why you got to believe in something. Universe, Buddha, whoever it is. For me, obviously, it's Jesus Christ. But you got to believe in something, so it's not just all on you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I end up doing that, and then from then on, we just really started to take off. And then we went from, at the time we were doing 4,000 accounts, then we went to 6,000, then we went to 7,000, then we went to 8,000, 10,000, 14,000, now 20,000 accounts in a year. But it was always that constant challenge that kept me going. And people ask me all the time, well, what sort of gives happiness? What brings happiness, right? Mm-hmm. And I call it, this is where I was going to share this little dog story with you. It's a balance. What I think gives happiness is you have to have a balance of 3 things. And it's a balance of all 3 things, which is you have to have purposes, you have to have problems, and you have to have what I call restricted freedom. You have to have all 3, right? And the idea is, if you realize that that part of life is having problems, when a problem comes your way, it's no big deal because it's part of life.
Right.
So your job in life is to have a purpose, which will come with a problem. You solve that problem, and then you have your freedom to celebrate and do what you want to do. But it's restricted. Restricted
freedom.
Because you better find a new purpose.
Right.
Because what ends up happening if you don't find a new purpose, then you'll get bored. So if you don't have a new purpose, you won't have any problems.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So then what happens is you end up bored.
Sure.
And if you don't have any problems, just like an Australian shepherd would do, I need to give that dog purpose every morning. Because if he doesn't, he's going to destroy my backyard.
Yeah.
Same thing with humans. If you don't give yourself purpose, you won't have problems. So you'll create your own problems.
Sure.
So let's just look at the guy that's got everything. Perfect family. Financially, he's off the chart. He's got everything going for himself. But let's just say he doesn't have any problems, right? He's going to start to get bored.
Yeah.
Too much time in his hands. Well, now he might just end up in an affair because there's just too much time in his hand. He's not creating anything.
Yeah.
He might just start partying too much, doing drugs. So you got to have some sort of purpose so you create your own problems to that purpose, because if you don't, you'll create your own problems.
Got it.
And if all you have is problems, that's where you go down a very bad place. So again, it's got to be a balance of all 3.
Yeah.
And I learned, and because of that, I use that in all 4 parts of. I try to use it at least. It's not always perfect, but I use it in 4 parts of my life, which is you have your faith, you have your family, you have your fitness, which includes the mind, and you have your finances, which is obviously your business. Each part of your life you need to work on, because if you don't do something for a long time, you tend to dislike it. If when you were 18 years old and you're hitting the gym for 10 years, you like it. But then let's just say for the last 12 years, you stopped going to the gym. You're going to start to dislike it. You're not even going to want to go to the gym. So now that part of your life starts crumbling, right? And if you let one of those pillars crumble, the whole thing can crumble.
Yeah, gotcha.
If you stop working on your marriage, you're eventually going to have problems.
Right.
You got to continue to work on that. So everything you do in life, you have to find a new challenge, right? And that's what keeps you balanced. And that's worked tremendously for me. I've also failed at a lot of it. I failed for a long time. I was telling you about earlier about I wasn't working on my mind.
Yeah. So it was causing a negative story.
A negative story.
Yeah.
For 19, I was telling you, from 15 to 21, all I did was study. From 20, once I started my own business, problem of having your own freedom sometimes. I had the freedom of having my own business, so I stopped studying. Nobody was telling me to study.
Yeah.
And then I know what I'm doing already. Why do I need to study? For 19 years, I didn't study. Well, I started to dislike it. And you couldn't get...
Dislike studying.
Oh, yeah. I hated it. You couldn't get me to pick up a book. You couldn't get me to listen to a podcast. But then those doubts started to set in as my company started to rise.
Right.
The doubt was, I'm not smart enough for this level of company
Production.
now.
And
Production.
Yeah.
My sales guys are probably smarter than me now. How am I supposed to lead them when they might be even better than me? These are all the BS I was feeding myself.
Yeah.
And it starts taking away from me. How am I going to lead? I mean, my new COO is way smarter than me. How am I supposed to lead him?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll start to self-sabotage, and finally I had to just attack the problem,
Right.
which was
weren't growing.
I wasn't growing.
And just to be clear, when he says studying, you're talking about reading books,
listening
to podcasts, right? Just growing yourself.
Growing yourself.
Yeah.
And now, since the beginning of the year, I've been listening to podcast books for an hour. Because what I noticed was, for 19 years, I've been hitting the gym. Mm-hmm. And that's like a cakewalk for me. I don't even have to think twice about it. It's a habit. It's a routine.
Yeah.
So I knew that the same way I developed that, I had to develop my mind.
Got it.
And I forced myself to do it. And at first, like anything, a lot of discomfort, but you're not going to grow unless you're willing to go through that discomfort.
Right.
And then what ended up happening after that, all these opportunities started coming my way. It's almost like if, again, God was like, I need to get you ready for this opportunity because it's going to come.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we land this show that my wife and I are on. Then all of a sudden,
many people may not know. So
my wife and I come out on this show called Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And that gave us a new level of exposure.
Sure.
And, for me, I've always felt like I was going to do something big, and it was going to be my chance to give back for all the blessings that I've had. Mm-hmm. And if I could show people how exactly I did it or talk about my story, maybe that might be the difference, But you have to be prepared when that opportunity comes. And then sure enough, I end up on Power Players with Grant Cardone, and then, talk about a pressure situation there. I was so fearful to go on that show because I'm like, man, if I go in there and I don't know what I'm talking about, he's gonna
the show ain't gonna air.
Yeah, it ain't gonna air. Or he's gonna just shred me to pieces.
Right.
But then I put myself in that. For me, it was a risk, right? Because what if you look dumb in front of the whole world?
What everybody thinks.
What everybody
self-doubt.
thinks.
Yeah.
Literally, that's self-doubt.
Yeah.
And finally, I just had to put myself to the fire. And next thing you know, I knocked it out of the ballpark.
Good.
And then all of a sudden, the confidence, again, you build your identity.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, I just got this new level of confidence that I hadn't felt in such a long, long time. And I started leading the way I used to lead back in the day.
Yeah, yeah.
And, now we're seeing the results because the company's like skyrocketing.
Yeah, I love it.
But it took me confronting something that I kept procrastinating on.
Right.
For years and years. I knew I had to study.
Yeah.
I already knew what the problem was.
Right.
And
it was you.
It was me.
Yeah. You were getting in the way.
I was getting away. Always find an excuse on why I wasn't doing it and blah, blah, blah.
So, here's what I love about this show, guys. If you listen back, he really did a great job at just taking us through a journey.
Thank you.
No, you really did. And it's it's the journey. And you know what? If you listen to this show, you will clearly be able to see what part of the journey you were on, why you're stuck in the journey, and what the next step is that you have to take in order to go through the journey. Because if you think about it, it starts number one with a kid with a purpose, right? Buy my mom a house, which, but you know, I don't know how many times I wanted to say we're like the same guy. I don't know how many times I want to say that. You'll see right now when you interview me, we're like the same guy, right?
That's awesome.
Buy my mom a house, right? And then it went into, you know, I believe I'm worth $100,000. You know, I can remember doing that myself. Everybody else in my family was making 50, and 100 grand was just the number back then, you know.
Yeah.
And then you go into like producing at a high level because of the fact that you memorize what to say, you get more stronger with your communication skills, so forth and so on. And then you go and then you leverage that, right? And you grow a business based off of everything that you've learned.
Yep.
And then you take it to another level, right? You reintroduce personal production into your life and you make that business skyrocket. Here's the problem. Most of us are stuck here in phase 1 and phase 2.
Yeah.
And we bounce back and forth before phase 1 and phase 2. And I think what Edwin has shown us, and hopefully what I try to show you on a daily basis, is that there is more that you can accomplish in life. You know, if you were to leave them with 1 or 2 things that could help them navigate through that journey, that could help them get unstuck,
So
what would it be?
I think one thing that I want to point out is, again, you're going to go through some failure, right?
Yeah.
And it's that most people, once they get that failure, they're scared to try again.
Yeah.
So I remember taking the company from 24 million to 37 million. Gross revenue was a success, but I made less money than when the company did 24 million. So I made an extra $14 million more, or whatever that was.
But you made less.
To make less.
Right.
I've seen it over and over with people. Once that happens, they're like, well, why am I going to grow, man? I make less money. Let me just go back to my comfort zone.
Right.
And it's what I said about earlier. It's like, no, I need to figure this out.
That's right.
Like, this is my challenge. I'm a slow learner sometimes, but I'm going to get this right.
Yes, absolutely.
And boom, it's that resiliency to go after it again.
Right.
And that's what we've been doing. And now, you know, taking action, all of a sudden, I land this president about a year ago that was the third in command at AT&T that is used to scaling. Right. And now it's like this vision that I've had of us being $1 billion company.
It can happen. Right.
Because now I got the doubt was like, well, man, scaling. I don't know if I could scale it. That's not my thing.
Right.
I mean, I know. And focus on what you are great at.
Yeah.
At a very young age, I knew my strengths, my God-given talents. I knew I could lead. I had influence on people. People just followed me. Even, I had influence over people.
Sure.
I knew how to train, which was key. And for me, training, if you know how to train, man, you're gold.
Yeah.
I could take a complicated process and make it simple.
Sure.
And that was really my gift. And then I knew I could sell, and I could recruit, right? And those 4 things is what I knew I was great at. And then I gave that a value. Right. And I said, that's just as good as any surgeon. In fact, I used to call myself Dr. Arroyave because I used to try to make $400 an hour when I first started.
Yep.
That was another game I would play.
Yeah.
Is I wanted to make $400 an hour because growing up, the only people I knew that were successful were doctors.
Right.
So I'm like, so I started calling myself Dr. Arroyave, and that was my goal, $400 an hour. But I gave myself this value, and then all this other stuff that you want to accomplish, like when I delegated, but I knew. So like when I made the decision, I was doing $300 a month back in 2009, take you back. I said, I want to build a company that's going to do 2,000 accounts a month. I need to go from 1 state to 35 states. I need to go from 15 sales reps to about 300 to 400 is my thought. I just knew I was going to do it. If I would have immediately thought the how, I would have psyched myself out. And I would have said, it can't happen.
Right.
And the reason the minute you say something won't happen, it won't. Instead, what I did was, this is what I want to do, and I have faith that the right people will come in front of me to make that impossible into a possible. And then sure enough, the right people just start landing in front of you. Bam, bam, bam. And now that I'm trying to take it to a whole different game, the same thing's happening all over again. All of a sudden, I get this president that is just amazing.
Yeah.
And we've spent the last year assembling 7 executives that I think are just amazing. When I did that $37 million and I made less money, I only had 2 executives. I was one of them. The other one was the CFO.
Right.
We were overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, for sure.
Overwhelmed, and we just lost money everywhere. I mean, I must have lost over $1 million in equipment just because mismanagement.
Yeah.
So then I had to go back to the drawing board.
Sure.
Okay, what did I do?
Sure.
But again, most people wouldn't have, they would have been like, I ain't doing that again.
Yeah.
I'm sticking to my comfort zone.
Yeah.
If you want to grow in life, you have to get out of your comfort zone if you want to do something bigger. And for me, again, I'll go back to my faith. There's opportunities that are given to you for a reason. I believe the opportunities I continue to get is because God knows I have a give back heart. And he knows I'm going to give back with that money.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when you get these opportunities, you have to take them.
Right.
You can't shy away from them.
Right.
You got to go after them. And again, it keeps it fun.
Yeah.
Keeps it fun. It keeps you alive.
I love it.
You know?
I love it.
And
Yeah.
you're always growing. You're never stopping. The minute you think you've grown,
You're done.
you're done.
Yeah. The war's not over till you die.
Exactly.
We'll leave it at that. How's
Yeah.
that? How do they get a hold of you?
So Ted Winator on Instagram is probably the best.
But how'd
part.
you get that name?
So for a long time,
Because for a long time I thought your name was Ted, by
Yeah.
the way, just to let you know.
so for a long time, I wasn't allowed to have my own Instagram profile.
Okay.
So I'd have to share an account with my wife.
Oh,
And then she gets on the show, and then all of a sudden, Teddy Mellencamp becomes this really big deal.
okay.
And all of a sudden, she's not paying attention to that one. So I'm like, can I just take it over?
Yeah.
And then little by little, I've taken it over.
Okay, gotcha.
Now I just need to switch the name to
The
Edwin
name to
Arroyave. She
Edwin.
still hasn't gotten to that point yet.
Yeah.
Because she still wants people to know, hey, I'm checking this. So it's
funny.
Ted Winator, which is Tedwin.
Okay, gotcha.
But then Tedwin was taken, so
Right.
it's Ted Winator. So it's TEDWINATOR. And then the other one is Join Skyline.
Okay.
And that one I want to just do a quick plug because it's for people that, if you have the mindset, but if you're looking for a vehicle that you can take immediate results, I always look at it, it's a high commission job that pays you, that you can learn within a week. Usually high commission jobs you can't learn within a week.
Right.
You got to wait a long time to learn it.
This can get you in the money right away.
Right away. You get paid every week. And
And that's on Instagram, Join Skyline?
yeah, and it's a good starter because from there, I mean, one of your top people came from there. And, I think it just helps you out so much,
Awesome.
learning that, right? So anyway, those are the 2.
And you guys are going to be with us at Relentless.
Yes.
We're going to figure out how to make that work. Yeah.
We're looking forward to that. I'm
Awesome.
excited.
Awesome.
Kobe Bryant's my favorite athlete of all
Good.
time.
Good.
So I can't wait to hear about his mindset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. That's a wrap, guys. This was an incredible episode of the Danny Morel Show. I recommend
And thanks
that
for having me, guys.
Yeah, save this one, replay it over and over and over,
Yeah.
and we'll see you next time.